members of the Central Bank of the Bahamas Board of Directors who are present. I've also seen representatives from the Clearing Banks Association, the credit unions, senior government officials, and Chamber of Commerce representatives, and all others. It is a pleasure to have you here this morning. And just so that I don't veer off script and eat into our precious time, I'm going to read my remarks. The central bank has taken an active role in promoting modernization of the payment system in the Bahamas. In this regard, preserving and expanding universal access to the regulated payment sector has become more challenged given recent domestic and international pressures that have adversely impacted the commercial banking infrastructure. In parallel with the adoption of new technology to enable more use of electronic payments, the commercial bank branch network in the Bahamas has decreased owing to operating cost pressures and compressed returns on weaker credit portfolios. Moreover, where the over-the-counter access remain within reach, the anti-money laundering systems and counter-financing of terrorism regulations have made it difficult for some segments of the population to establish deposit accounts. Such accounts are still at the foundation of the domestic payments infrastructure. More inclusive access to payments and other financial services is important for the Bahamas. The archipelagic nature of the country, added to the small total population, underline the need to accelerate the adoption of technology that would reduce costs and the ease of access. Modernization, however, must preserve and strengthen the safeguards against criminal abuse of the financial system. It is the central bank's intention, working with key stakeholders in the public and private sector, to promote further modernization of the domestic financial services sector such that access is unimpeded, particularly in the remote, less developed family islands, irrespective of size, and with access enabled across all pockets of domestic commercial activities and actors. The bank envisaged an accelerated shift towards use of electronic payments with a concurrent reduction in cash transactions. While physical cash use still dominates the payment space in the Bahamas, shift in the payments landscape continue to be towards electronic modes, with both cash and check use declining steadily in recent years in favor of increased point of sales use of credit cards and debit cards. And there's a growing reliance on electronic funds transfers. Inevitably, though, flows clear through the clearing houses operated by the central bank or the commercial banks. Check usage has been on a downward trajectory throughout the last decade, even though they remain the dominant method of non-cash payments. As for the volume of electronic transfers, which largely represent salary payments and other commercial payments, these have increased by an average of 12% each year since 2014, as reported by the automated clearinghouse. Card-based access to payment services has also shifted in favor of electronic settlement. Conversely, the use of debit cards for point of sales, while the use of debit cards for point of sales payment has also increased, we've also noted a decrease in the use of automatic banking machines or ATM machines for cash-based transactions, even though over the period in question, the network of ATM machines in the Bahamas has expanded. Now, these high-level data do not capture gaps in inclusiveness or access. The anecdotal evidence suggests that, for example, the reliance on check payments is still prevalent for firms that have not started to make wage payment by direct transfers, such as entities in the construction sector. Additionally, some of the wage earning concentration of check payees either lack access to deposit accounts or require swifter access to the funds than is permitted when such instruments are deposited. Additionally, the incentive for check payments has persisted in part because in the enterprise sector, concerns still remain about the cost of making payments through other means. These costs and inclusion factors slow the pace of payment system modernization and the important goals of reducing check and cash usage. Surmounting these challenges requires a reduction in barriers to access provided through deposit services. They also require initiatives to increase the ability of commercial enterprises to accept or to initiate electronic payments. The central bank strategy for accelerated payment system modernization is therefore with a broad set of objectives in mind to increase inclusion and access to financial services and to achieve a greater reliance on cost-effective electronic services delivery. In the mix of activities informing the strategy will encompass stakeholder education and awareness and, where essential, proposals for more reforms to the supporting legal infrastructure. The strategic goals for the central bank include the following: introduction of a digital version of the Bahamian dollar, universal point of sales access to receipt of electronic payments, universal access of residents to the means to initiate low-cost digital payments, universal access of individuals to basic depository services from financial institutions, accelerated reduction in the use of check and physical cash for payments. The bank believes that the necessary infrastructure will have to be in place to ensure fully interoperable payment settlement between individuals, the private sector entities, and the public sector. This would at a minimum involve adaptation to mobile phone technology alongside card-based systems to ensure that payment means are accessible to all segments of the population who might be less comfortable with certain technologies, such as the elderly. To be compatible with the rigors of AML, anti-money laundering and terrorist financing safeguards, a robust national identity infrastructure will have to be installed to expand upon and ensure a more fully integrated system within the domestic space. The bank contemplates actions, therefore, in the following areas with the help of and support of the important stakeholders, particularly in the public sector. First, development of a digital identification system with appropriate legal infrastructure. It is hoped that this system would be piloted in the financial services sector, providing secure identification input for services initiation or relationship maintenance. Review of banking sector regulations and guidance to ensure access at a minimum to some minimum level of deposit services with non-exclusionary customer due diligence standards. It's another action point. The bank would also sponsor, if necessary, an interoperable platform for digital Bahamian currency with a minimum level of payments capability. The bank will review policies for payment services providers regarding direct access to existing payment settlements infrastructure and associated access to clearing balances which may need to be maintained at the central bank. The bank believes that it's going to be important to develop a framework to equip micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises with point-of-sales capacity to receive electronic payments. As part of our initiatives, the bank expects that it will be able to identify a family island setting for a piloted introduction of universal payment services. The timeline for the launch of this pilot would be within the next 24 to 30 months, ideally within the next 24 months. Now, as the largest counterparty to retail payments transaction and the driver of the legislative agenda, the government has a pivotal role to play in the payment system's evolution. And we're therefore grateful that the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance is here today. He will speak with us very shortly. But the government's role starts with the public sector's receptivity to transitioning away from issuance of checks and to the adoption of systems that allow the government to easily receive electronic payments. There's already progress in these areas, which is expected to deepen, especially as regards the reach of services in the Family Islands, and in tandem with efforts already promoted to increase the access of casual wage earners to banking services. The government's role will also be pivotal in supporting the timely changes to the legal framework to put in place the appropriately evolved infrastructure for the electronic security and exchange of personal data. The central bank proposes, therefore, to work closely with key public sector agencies, including the Ministry of Finance and the Attorney General's office, and others whom I would not mention at this instant because I need to speak with them later this morning. But we work with these key agencies. One of those agencies would be the national agency that is responsible for the identification systems which we currently have. They're very important in this process. But we will work together in charting the infrastructural reforms for the next phase of the payment systems modernization. And we would stress that some of the basic infrastructure foreshadowed do have wider use within the economy, and I believe we will see some of those prospective areas for use within the economy as this morning's session progresses. And I therefore hope that you will get a lot from the session. It is only a beginning. It will not cover everything from A to Z or from primary school to university level in terms of what we're trying to cover. We want to make sure that the entire population understands what's involved, because people need to be safe and comfortable in going into the digital space, and education is important to that.